A high-ranking cardinal is voicing grave misgivings about the Synod on Synodality, which kicks off today. Join us with the latest from the Eternal City, Church Militant's own correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, the Synod has begun, and Pope Francis has already taken a swing at conservative prelates and their so-called ideologies. Tell us about it.
Brad, the Synod has begun. Has it begun with a bang or has it begun with a whimper? That is the question a lot of people are asking. What we do know for certain is that it has begun in a fractious atmosphere with quite a few cardinals and bishops lobbing grenades at it and asking very relevant questions. It's also begun in a rather damp atmosphere where crowds are not thronging, the ecumenical service that preceded the Synod. St. Peter's Square was virtually empty. And I speak to the people in Rome, and they're just not interested in what's going on. They have lost, any kind of respect for the Catholic Church. Cardinal Burke said it very, very clearly yesterday at a conference organized by the Italian news media, the New Daily Compass, which is a very fine Catholic media. And he spoke at this conference, and basically what he said was the whole synodal business contradicts the true identity of the Church.
Now, also, Pope Francis is talking about there shouldn't be human ploys or political calculations or ideological battles going on in his open remarks today. What do you think he was talking about there?
Pope Francis was very obviously responding to the 5 cardinals, including Cardinal Raymond Burke, who have raised these 5 dubia, these 5 doubts, asking very penetrating questions about the nature of the Synod and what it is going to result in. And Pope Francis's responses were, in his sermon, he insisted repeatedly that the Synod is not a parliament. It is not a political institution. There is going to be no lobbying, either from the left or from the right. He said that people need to be open to God, to the Spirit, and wait and walk with God to see what God is going to do through this movement that brings people together from every corner of the earth.
Now, he also mentioned there was some fears about the Synod that are beginning. The fears actually coming from Cardinal Burke, as you mentioned yesterday, at a conference in Rome. Can you tell us some of his fears about the Synod?
His fears are basically twofold. He is afraid that the Synod is a threat to the Church's moral teaching and a threat to the Church's structures. He used the term a soft revolution, that the Synod is going to orchestrate a soft revolution within the Church. Let me read a very important comment that he made. He said, "The Church of me, myself, and I, where each person recognizes himself in his personally curated set of beliefs, may promise satisfaction, but it is a make-believe, delusional religion of self-worship in which God is relegated to the role of the divine affirmer of whatever each one decides to believe." So in a sense, what he's saying is that there are 2 religions. One is Christianity, and the other is what we have called a moralistic therapeutic deism, where God basically wants to make you happy and affirm you, doesn't matter how you live. And the Synod is basically trading Christianity for moralistic therapeutic deism.
Now, Jules, it really seems like his fears are well warranted, Cardinal Burke's, because this week, the way that the Cardinal Fernandez and with the Pope's signature responded to the dubia, which I guess they responded back in July, but it was published by Fernandez this week. And you know, what he was saying there on twofold, you know, he's talking about weakening of church structure and weakening of the teaching on morality. Not that they're contradicting, they're just not bringing it forward. When Francis, the second question of the dubia of Burke got answered this week, that on blessing gay couples, it's left up to the pastoral prudence must adequately discern whether there are forms of blessings that can be called for. And of course, if anybody is struggling with anything and they come to a priest and say, hey, Father, I'm struggling with this, you know, same-sex attraction or something, you can get a blessing, go to confession, spiritual direction, whatever you want. But we're talking about what's already been going on in Belgium and Germany and all this, where they're already having couples come forward to have themselves blessed together as a couple. And Fernandez is saying, yeah, that's that's left up to the Father James Martin priest out there. So that to me seems like it's very well warranted that that's the direction things are going. That it's just a matter of affirmation for those people that they're not coming to change, but they're actually just coming to have their themselves affirmed in their anti-Catholic lifestyle. Is that fair to say?
Brad, your take on this reminds me of that very sad verse at the end in the last chapter of the book of Judges, which says there was no king in Israel, and each person did as he thought was right in his eyes. And what this new dubia seems to be telling priests, do what is right in your eyes. This incidentally straight out of the Anglican playbook, where, it started with same-sex couples coming up and saying, well, we are in a celibate relationship, including clergy couples, by the way, and the bishops affirming them and saying, well, as long as you're celibate, as long as you're not sleeping with each other, it's okay. But everybody knew that this was a real joke, that they were in a sexually intimate relationship. People have been trying to make sense of what the Pope said, and, furiously attempting to exegete his document. But what they forget is that if one understands the first principle of exegesis, which is authorial intention, what is the intention of the author, and you read that in context, in the light of praxis, what Pope Francis has already permitted, Germany, Switzerland, etc., it becomes very difficult not to read the document against what is already praxis. You also look at the genre, the form of the document, which is another basic principle of exegesis, and you see that it is quite deliberately convoluted. We had this BBC serial, very funny serial, going on for a long time, called Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister, and a senior civil servant, Sir Humphrey Appleby, was, very, very skilled at producing these documents. So a person who is in favor of gay relationships can look at the document and say, hey, look, the Pope has permitted me to do this. Isn't it great? But a person who wants to Pope-splain can look at the same document and say, oh, no, it's, a mere prudential judgment, and kind of go into all sorts of insufferable sophistry on what a blessing actually means, which is, by the way, what some priests and lay people are doing. But then you look at Archbishop Fernandez, who openly states that his guru, and we have discussed this before, Brad, on our Rome Dispatches, his guru is the German theologian Hans-Georg Gadamer, the philosopher. And this is precisely what Gadamer talks about. He's all about reader response criticism. Reader looks at a text and can take away whatever he wants to take from there. The whole thing, the document, is straight out of the Gadamerian playbook. Well,
now, Burke is worried about two things. He's worried about the weakening of church teaching on morality. He's worried about the weakening of church structures. And this week's other dubia that kind of flies under the radar in some areas is there was a Czechoslovakian cardinal who wrote in about, well, what about active sexual couple who's divorced, civilly remarried, living, an adulterous relationship, and wants to receive communion. And that was always against Canon 915. If you're a manifest grave sinner, you can't be distributing communion to them. And Fernandez comes out and says, well, and with the Pope's signature, comes out and answers that dubia and says, well, it's up to that person to decide. To me, that's like lack of accompaniment. There's no teaching on sacrilege, the real presence. You need to be in a state of grace to receive. All of that's left out of the conversation. And where's the pastoral guidance to that person to say, hey, you want to jump off a cliff, go ahead, I'm not going to pull you back. I mean, your take on that?
My take is, by the way, Cardinal Dominik Duka is not Czechoslovakian. He's from the Czech Republic, and he was Archbishop Emeritus of Prague. It's very, commendable that this 90-year-old cardinal has come forward with this set of dubia. Now, the response to this, as you rightly said, is pastoral guidance. As a pastor, I have no authority on my own. My authority comes from God's revelation in the scriptures. And the only authority that I have is to open up God's revelation to my flock. So in a sense, I lead my flock into the green pastures of God's revelation where they can feed for themselves, unless they're sick, and I pick them in my arms and give them cod liver oil or something like that. And that is what goes completely against what, the idea of telling your sheep to do whatever they want to. But what's the point of having pastoral authority, pastoral guidance, if the sheep are going to be left to fend for themselves? The big question is, what will happen when the wolf comes to get at them? Here, it seems like we're opening the door of the sheepfold and letting in foxes and wolves and all sorts of dangerous creatures.
It seems like the ideologues and the ideologies, it seems like he's referring almost to like objective morality, which is where Cardinal Burke and the others are coming from. They want principles on which to act. And they come from the bottom up with this situational ethics, which is all about the circumstances and trying to build something from the bottom up. When situational ethics versus intrinsic evils has been the rage for the last 50, 60 years. So I really do see that Cardinal Burke is right in being worried about church structures, like, and even in that response to the dubia, on gay blessings. The Fernandez says that it's not even appropriate for a diocese, a bishop's conference, or any other ecclesial structure to constantly officially enable procedures or rituals for all kinds of matter, because not everything is part of a practical discernment in particular circumstances. So it's all about particular circumstances continually, and even bishops' conferences and bishops can't make the distinction for the priest who's left to discern on his own. It really seems like it's just a free-for-all at the bottom. One last question, Jules. Cardinal Victor Fernandez of the Dicastery of Doctrine of Faith we've been talking about now says he doesn't expect too much from the Synod. But, this week we already had doors open that, used to be closed on reception of Holy Communion to people living in grave immorality and blessing couples who come forward. Not that it's confused with marriage, but it's still blessing them in their sinful relationship. What are your expectations of the Synod?
Brad, again, looking at praxis, what has been going on the ground for quite some time now, for the last 4 or 5 years, and the fact that nothing has been done to bring church discipline, which is God-ordered discipline. One has to read the Cardinal's words, with a certain degree of hermeneutic of suspicion, because the Cardinal, for example, has not given a straight answer to whether he will reconsider the 2021 DDF's ruling barring gay marriage that Pope Francis had just overruled, in a sense. So the game being played, as I said yesterday here, is, Rome was not built in a day. And, in England, we say slowly, slowly, catchy monkey. We begin engineering a reversal in church teaching, and that is going to take some time, but it has to begin somewhere, and it's beginning here and now.
Well, I work from a hermeneutic of trust, actually, in Christ. It's his church, and when he wants to clean it up, it could happen in a heartbeat. And we look forward to that day. And well, this synod that opened today will run for 3.5 weeks, ending on Sunday, October 29th. Pray that it doesn't do too much harm and that maybe even some good might come out of it after all. Either way, we'll keep you updated. Jules, thank you so much for your report and your remarks.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.